even though I know most of you have heard 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, because you've been to a wedding or two. And that whole thing that you sit and you hear that over and over again, words that were never really initially designed for weddings. It was not for a wedding that Paul sat down to write the words of 1 Corinthians. Paul had been at the Corinthian church and had spent over 1.5 years of his life there. He had helped start that church, and he was there, and he had built a church in such a way that it was a very viable church. It had all kinds of gifts and skills inside the church. God had blessed the church very much like Maple Temple. There are all kinds of gifts in the church, but even in every church, even one that Paul started, there was trouble. And while Paul was in Ephesus, he got a letter saying there's trouble over there in the church that just started. All kinds of division was going on because people were running behind one leader or another leader or somebody else. And somehow or another they had got their eye off God. Sounds like the church to me. Sometimes we're so busy lifting up humans that we forget the reason we do what we do is supposed to be for God. If that wasn't bad enough, they had all these gifts and they were running around talking about, I can prophesy, I can speak in tongues, and you know, we got some folk who like to talk about what they can do for God. But the thing that Paul wanted to understand, if you look at the 12th chapter, he lists up all these gifts that were resident and very present in the church at Corinth. They had all these gifts, but they were missing something. And he said there's something more excellent than the gift that you got. I'm glad you can sing a little bit. I'm glad you can speak in tongues a little bit. I'm glad you got a little money. I'm glad you got some faith. I'm glad you got all those things. But let me tell you something, but all that you got, if you ain't got love when you're doing what you do, then it's for naught. Too many of us do what we do for the wrong reason. Some of y'all want to be patted on the back. Didn't I do a good job? Huh? Some of you, and I ain't gonna beat nobody else because I know today is your day to be loved. Part of the problem sometimes is that we don't know that even in loving sometimes you got to correct. That if I love you, then guess what? I got to help you know how to love me. See, some of y'all, when y'all love, y'all just don't love one way. But you know, you got to teach people how to treat you. See, sometimes you got to treat people how to treat you. And if you're going to love me, there's something you got to do. I don't know who told you you ought to lay down and let somebody walk all over you, because that was never God's plan. And you need to help somebody understand. If you're going to love me, you ought to treat me right. Is that